Mark Rogers TV back with you talking Big Ten quarterbacks, and we're looking at the top 5 going into 2015. And there have to be, 11 teams in the Big Ten out of the 14 that are saying, can we not have one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league? Why do 3 of them play in Columbus, Ohio? So you obviously know where I'm going here, and for good reason. Let's start at number 5 with Cardale Jones, probably the most significant 3-game run in the history of college football. I don't know that we can come up with a better run from a completely inexperienced quarterback. We all know the story of 12 Gage coming off the bench in replacing J.T. Barrett at the end of the Michigan game, given the keys, forced into action against Wisconsin as a 4-point underdog in the Big Ten championship game, winning that game 59-0, then facing mighty Alabama in the Sugar Bowl there in the Superdome and pulling off the upset, down 21-6 at one point in the game, and then completely annihilating Oregon 42-20 in the national championship game. What a run for Cardale Jones. The numbers don't really do him justice. They are extremely good. 12 of 17, 257 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks against Wisconsin. 18 of 35, 243, a touchdown and a pick against Bama. He did run for 43 yards as well. And then against Oregon, threw it just 23 times, 16 complete, 242, a touchdown and a pick, 38 rushing. Forget the stat sheet. You had to see the guy play. Consider, again, not having played meaningful snaps at Ohio State, being thrust into the Big Ten championship game. And even as impressive as that showing was, consider he played from out in front the entire game. The Buckeyes scored quickly. They went up 7-0, 14, 21, 28, and on from there, and were never challenged. So many of us, me included, thought, go to the Alabama game, face a top-ranked defense on the road in Louisiana, and you're not going to be up 7-0, 14-0, 21-0. You're going to have to face score adversity and also pass rush and secondary complexity that you didn't face against Wisconsin. And Cardale Jones, yeah, he made a few errant throws, but it was obvious early in the game that he wasn't going to try to take anything that the defense did not give him. He was well schooled by Urban Meyer to let it fly out of bounds if he needed to, and he played a remarkable game in that one and then showed us some running skill in that one, or just running prowess right up the gut, just bowling over defenders when he needed to get key first downs. And then against Oregon in the championship game, much of the same, hitting on the big plays. The completion percentage doesn't wow you, but hitting on the big chunk yardage plays down the field for big points and big yardage. Cardale Jones at number 5. Based on that 3-game run, you could rank him number 1 in the Big Ten. I rank him behind a guy that threw more interceptions than touchdown passes, because we consider, I'm not basing this, strictly on performance, meaning the numbers. I'm basing this on performance, taking into consideration help and support. At number 4 in the Big Ten, I've got Christian Hackenburg of Penn State, thrust into the role as a freshman under Bill O'Brien, who brought him along ever so well in the offense, and O'Brien moving on to the Houston Texans. Served him very well as the number 1 quarterback coming out of high school. 20 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, as Penn State surprisingly won 7 games in 2013. So much was expected of Hackenburg and Penn State last year. He disappointed. He looked lost at times. He came out with a big second-half effort in the opener against Central Florida, 434 yards passing, and the game-winning field goal late to win at 26-24. Then he went into a serious funk. Hackenburg had some bad games against Michigan, only scoring 13 points in a loss, 21 of 32, everything underneath 160 yards, 177 on 18 of 42 against Maryland. He had a game against Indiana, 12 of 29, ugly, 168 yards, 2 picks, and a loss to the Hoosiers. And then against Illinois, 8 of 16 at 93 yards, a game in which, again, he looked lost. So what happened to Christian Hackenburg? Bad offensive line, and he was just getting comfortable with 2 of the top receivers in the Big Ten, Geno Lewis and Deshaun Hamilton, 2 extremely young players as sophomores and a freshman. And again, the offensive line, and Christian Hackenburg is not the type player that is going to create offense by himself. He needs a pocket. He needs somewhere to throw. He needs to be able to have room, reasonable room in that pocket. Christian Hackenburg, in 2014, 56%, just under 3,000 yards, 12 touchdowns, 15 picks. Again, coming off the freshman campaign, 20 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. But in the bowl game against Boston College, the Nittany Lions needed him. They were getting chewed up on the ground, and BC was scoring points. 34 of 50 coming through in the clutch with 4 touchdown passes against no interceptions and 50 pass attempts, 371 yards. Mighty impressed with Christian Hackenburg coming back from a bad season to play very well and winning the bowl game in overtime against BC. Christian Hackenburg, I expect big things out of this kid coming up this fall at number 4. Okay, back to the Ohio State triumvirate. No, actually, we go to Michigan State. I got Connor Cook at number 3. Think back to the 2013 campaign. He was coming off of 2012 in which he was the backup. He was thrown into the lineup against TCU in the bowl game and led a game-winning field goal drive. Then it was a battle back and forth between Andrew Maxwell and Connor Cook. Cook lost the job. Maxwell won the job. And against Notre Dame, Cook came into the game and made a statement after the loss, the only loss, what turned out to be the only loss for Michigan State on the season, said after the game, had I played that entire game, we would have won. And Connor Cook played the rest of the season, and Michigan State won every game. Looked extremely impressive down the stretch. Again, this was a situation in which he was game manager for much of the season. Give it to Jeremy Langford. Give it to the other backs that they had at that point at Michigan State. But progressively, they gave Cook more breathing room, put more of the offense on his back. He had 300-yard passing games against Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game against a loaded defense. They weren't nearly as good in 2013 as 14, but still a very talented Ohio State defense. And then against possibly the best front seven in college football in the Rose Bowl, Connor Cook came back from a horrible pick six, which he underthrew the screen pass and should have thrown it away. Threw it right into Stanford's hands. Pick six for the touchdown. Could have been a back-breaker for Michigan State. He bounced back from that, much like he bounced back last season. Cotton Bowl, down 20 to Baylor, looking to make the comeback in the last 10 minutes. Threw a horrible sideline interception, but he came back and led the Michigan State Spartans to a comeback win over Baylor in the Cotton Bowl. So in 2 seasons at Michigan State, Connor Cook, 24-3, 2 top 5 finishes, 2 major bowl wins in the Rose and the Cotton over Stanford and Baylor. Connor Cook, we've got at number 3 in the Big Ten, coming off 24 touchdowns, 8 picks last season, and back in 2013, 22-6 touchdown to interception ratio for Connor Cook. All right, at number 2, a guy who has not taken a snap since the beginning of 2014. It's going to be almost 2 years by the time Braxton Miller takes a snap for Ohio State or for somebody else. He may show up on a top 5 list for MarkRogersTV in another conference if it turns out to be LSU, Alabama, Florida State, or who knows who else. Braxton Miller, 2-time Big Ten offensive MVP. This guy carried the mail. He was the guy for Ohio State before they developed some top-flight receivers like Devin Smith, but when he was just strictly a home run threat, even more so than he turned out to be as a junior and senior. And also when they had guys like Corey Brown, Philly Brown doing a nice job in the slot, but not a dynamic receiver. No running back help until Carlos Hyde emerged in 2013. In 2011, as a freshman, Miller had little around him. The situation was a little bit better in 2012 when Hyde emerged, but he had no dependable deep threats, and it was all on Braxton Miller to create 1,400 rushing yards and then throw for 2,500 yards. This kid was producing close to 4,000 yards of total offense and 35 touchdowns rushing and passing. He didn't develop into a great pocket passer. This kid is extremely talented, the most talented quarterback on this list when you just look at running, throwing. He's got a cannon, but he still needs to develop as a quarterback. We'll see if the rotator cuff comes back. We're hearing some negative reports about Braxton Miller still being injured and the rotator cuff not responding as they had hoped. So Braxton Miller's future might not be at quarterback in the NFL, but for right now, we've got Braxton Miller listed as the number 2 quarterback in the Big Ten out of Ohio State. Now let's go to the redshirt sophomore. He didn't finish the season, but oh, what a season JT Barrett had. Lop off the beginning, lop off the end, and this was about as good a run as you can see of any quarterback at any time, Big Ten or otherwise. JT Barrett, 65% completion percentage, 34 touchdowns, 10 picks, just under 1,000 yards rushing. Certainly would have went way over 1,000 yards had he been able to complete the season, and 11 rushing touchdowns. JT Barrett broke Drew Brees' Big Ten record for total touchdowns in a season with 45, and he didn't finish the Michigan game. He didn't play against Wisconsin, Alabama, or Oregon. 3+ games JT Barrett missed. He would have been probably well over 50, 55 touchdowns easily at that rate. Think back to the Virginia Tech game. He was in over his head. Urban Meyer was outcoached by Frank Beamer, and Virginia Tech really locked on the receivers on the outside, brought the pass rush against JT Barrett in that Bear defense. 9 of 29, 3 interceptions in that game, but he really turned it around. Against Maryland, Rutgers, and Cincinnati, 11 TDs, no picks. He had the big rushing performance in overtime with 2 touchdowns rushing against Penn State, 300-yard passing game against Michigan State, and the showdown in East Lansing on the road with 3 touchdown passes. JT Barrett, the touch, the anticipation, he can throw in small windows. He doesn't have the cannon that Braxton Miller or Cardale Jones has, but the anticipation, the grasp of the offense, he's well ahead of the other 2 guys when it comes to running the offense and letting the other playmakers do their thing and distributing the football. Again, the anticipation was uncanny for a kid who had not played since going back to his junior season in high school because he tore his ACL back then. And then, of course, the ankle injury against Michigan forced him out of the lineup. It will be interesting to see if JT Barrett wrestles this job away from Cardale Jones coming up this fall. All right, there's the top 5 quarterbacks in the Big Ten, and it's a checkered list because of a number of factors going on here with Braxton Miller and Cardale Jones in particular, and the health of JT Barrett. Barrett, number 1. Miller, 2. Connor Cook, number 3 of Michigan State. Number 4, we've got Christian Hackenburg of Penn State. And at number 5, 12 Gauge, the guy with the cannon, Cardale Jones of Ohio State. Love to hear what you have to say about the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten right here on Mark Rogers TV.